All right. So often when we hear in the West about the Arabs, especially in relation to their beliefs, we automatically think Islam and the great Arabic civilizations established following their 7th century, expansion over much of the Middle East and South Asia and, well, north of Africa and into Spain. But before the advent of Islam, the Arabs were polytheistic and often created very sophisticated civilizations that thrived even beyond Arabia into what is now Jordan, Palestine, Syria, and Iraq. The Roman archaeologist by the name of Warwick Ball declared, when viewing the spectacular ruins of Petra or Palmyra, it is not often appreciated that one is examining Arab civilization as much as if one were examining Islamic Damascus or Baghdad. The Arab Nabataean Kingdom did indeed create the sculpted wonders of Petra, while the Arab Palmyrene Kingdom, centered about the major trading metropolis of Palmyra, even challenged the power of Rome itself. As far as their beliefs, well, the jinn, who were later incorporated into Islam, were often appeased or feared by these ancient Arabs, while they worshiped such gods as the Shura and Manat and Al-Uzza, the latter described as the mighty goddess. Unfortunately, of course, in the case of Palmyra, the Islamic State, ISIL, threatened much of these regions. We will learn why Palmyra is so important, even from a modern standpoint. In fact, we will learn how much of this Arab legacy continued on into the Islamic era. So let us explore the rich Arabic heritage that was already thriving long before Muhammad in the 7th century CE. Now, talking about Arabs and Arab culture before Islam really is a difficult business. To a non-specialist, the term Arab is so often firmly connected with Islam, often to the degree that Arab and Muslim are deemed as synonymous. And the idea that Arabs held very different religious beliefs is an unfamiliar one. The reality is that Arabs, both before and after Islam, have had a diversity of beliefs. And today, many Arabs are Christians too, and followers of other beliefs. It's very diversified. But of course, specialists tend to have become somewhat divided on these definitions when it comes to how expansive Arab influence and civilization was in ancient times. For example, to the Roman historian Fergus Miller, he states that nothing in the extensive evidence from Palmyra or Nabatea suggests that either people identified themselves as Arab, unquote. And yet, in contrast, we just made a quote from Warwick Ball, who said, when viewing the spectacular ruins of Petra and Palmyra, it is not often appreciated that one is examining Arab civilization as much as if one were examining Islamic Damascus or Baghdad. So you have this conflict. So what's going on? Now, identification for who should be defined as Arab has often fallen prey to various stereotypes. All inhabitants of Arabia, inclusive of nomads and camel breeders and brigands from the desert areas, are often swept into the category of Arab, who had often not identified themselves as being such a background, right? And Arabs, while they're connected with the desert, and this idea has endured for many, for a long period of time. We'll talk about how long. Still, Arabs also live in city areas, urban areas. Let's go to the map here. The first image. Arabia itself was originally a country of diverse peoples. But it is the Arabs whom we hear of most, and they rise to increasingly prominence in the course of Arabian history, until eventually in early Islamic times, they are in a position to claim Arabia as their own. Hence, it is called Arabia. Let's go to the next image. Arabia was positioned between two great ancient civilizations, Mesopotamia on the east and Egypt on the west. And the literary as well as archaeological evidence proves that from 2500 to 1750 BCE, Eastern Arabia was thriving economically. There's also a place known as Dilmun. You can see this on the map, located in what is now Bahrain. This was a trade center, especially for copper. There's also south of Dilmun is Megan. This is also an important center known for its black stone in the mountains. So let's go to the next image. You can take a look here of Dilmun. That's what it looks like. But let's go to the next image. Well, and so for a while, this area thrived and was connected again in many ways to Arabia and to the Arabs. But when the copper deposits discovered in Cyprus and Anatolia came about, the draw of trading south began to dry up. And that with the decline of both Mesopotamian civilization around 1750 and the Indus Valley civilization, well, around the same time, also decreased the demand in this region. And then the Assyrians under Tukati Nerneta, he reigned from 1243 to 1207. He became both king of Dilmun as well as Mulua. The Nineveh grew rich from the trade exchange via Dilmun. With the Assyrians falling to Neo-Babylonians and then to Persia, much of the Middle East was united under the virtually international tongue of Aramaic, which did facilitate other Semitic tongues, including, of course, Arabic. So we got to keep that in mind. So you have this language that goes about. So let's go back to me. So let's go back to the term also Arab. The term Arab begins to be used both by the Assyrians and those known as the Israelites at about the same time, about the 9th century BCE, which suggests that it was the name that the Arabs used for themselves. What its original significance was, we do not know, though one of its meanings is possibly pure. And this may be significant. I do find it interesting that the term Hebrew or Habaru could also be designated as those who are on the other side of something, that be maybe the Tigris and Euphrates River, but also has a sensibility that connects to ideals of purity too, that we are apart from others. So maybe the Arab term is likewise having the same sensibilities. But anyway, it is interesting to note that, however, the stereotype that Arabs are connected to the desert starts this early. It starts, for example, we know that in biblical works, the word Arabic or Arab is synonymous with somebody who is a desert dweller and who lives a nomadic way of life, as in contrast to settled peoples. This does not mean that there's no settled Arabs. This is the viewpoint that we get from the Bible. For example, we see in Jeremiah 3:2, it says, "You waited by the roadside for lovers like an Arab in the desert," which seems to imply that Arabs love the desert. Or how about this line from Isaiah? "Babylon will be overthrown by God," says the prophet Isaiah. "Never again will the Arab pitch his tent there, or the shepherds make their folds." And so you have that. How about this one? "Do not show to an Arab the sea, or to a Sidonian, the desert, for their occupations are different. Of course, Sidon is located right along the sea. And so here the idea, once again, that we see pretty deeply entrenched. This is, by the way, from the 7th century BCE, from the sage by the name of Akhkar. We see already that there is a very strong tie to Arabs with the desert, at least in the mindset of people living in that area. Even the Assyrian king by the name of Sargon II, who reigned from 721 to 705, speaks of, quote, the Arabs who live far away in the desert and who know neither overseers nor officials. So this is the view of outsiders. However, that's a problem too, because these are the views of outsiders. And their views are different, right? And these observations that arrive from non-Arabic peoples come from Assyrians and Babylonians and Israelites and Greeks and Romans and Persians. But we also cobble together chance findings from archaeologists. And then we have reconstructions from later Muslim authors who are interested in the environment in which their scripture and their prophet were born, but suspicious of pagan beliefs that are connected to it. However, with that said, I am very thankful to these Muslim writers who did take the time to do a lot of research on pre-Islamic beliefs to a certain degree. And I got some good news for you. We're going to be quoting from them later on and their viewpoints and perspectives and what they preserved for us to understand and interpret today. Okay, so much of what we know about the Arabs, as I said, arrived from non-Arabs, but we do have pre-Islamic materials here and there. Most of it comes via the form of poetry, which sometimes touches upon religion. It's very pagan. It's very fatalistic. It does seem to refer to various rituals. We also use inscriptions. There's a lot of graffiti that is laying around. Much of this graffiti addresses the various deities, making requests for benefits or favors or mercy or well-being from various hardships, much of it related to the desert and the weather. But we have a lot of names here and there. But putting it all together is not an easy task. Putting this talk together was not an easy task. So I had, so I use a few sources. I want to recommend a few just for fun. One author I want to refer to, his name is Robert Hoyland. This is a really good book, and it's called Arabia and the Arabs. And Hoyland, again, he actually wrote for me. We had a correspondence years ago, and I had a magazine called Sacred History Magazine, and this was our Islam issue. And in the Islam issue, I asked him to write an article on, guess what? That's right, pre-Arabs and pre-Islamic Arab beliefs. And so he wrote this wonderful article for me with all these quite lovely photos and so forth, yada, yada. So I do recommend his work. Another work that I used is Roman Arabia by G.W. Bowersock. This is another good one. There's actually quite a few journals that I used as well, and primary sources like You Cannot Believe. But again, this was not an easy task. And going over these materials gave me a bit of a, how do I put this, a headache, literally a headache, because it's not easy. Okay, especially, of course, getting through the names and saying the names correctly. So I do want to say ahead of time that when I pronounce various names, I'm still, even though I do have a knowledge of Syriac, my languages are Greek and Latin. and German and French. And so some of these words do not come as easily as I'd want them to be. So, okay, so, but let's talk about some general characteristics of religion according to the Arabs. Let's jump into the materials right now. First and foremost, ancient Arabs retained their animistic beliefs. They're very animistic. Let's take a look at an image. Why not we? Okay, so retained their animistic beliefs. In fact, long into the historical period. David Burnett, another good source, states that power can be understood in many ways: physical, political, economic, social, and religious. The secular Western worldview tends to regard all power as originated from within the material world. In contrast, primal worldviews see such powers not only as being real within the empirical world, but as having their primary origins outside of the visible world. And though these are unearthly kinds of powers, so they are animistic. They, within this animism, they are also from there seeing the spirit in all things, right? Whatever it may be, but they are also polytheistic as well. Let's go to the next image. And so we must remember that the Arabs of Arabia and beyond were indeed polytheists. And as the Arabs had no divisions between public and private life, what one believed always connected somehow to the greater community. Still, every tribe had their principal god and other gods by association. This could be very complicated as a situation. For example, when you're traveling from place to place, village to village, how should one interact with these other gods and goddesses that may actually not be your own? With this in mind, you pay all the deities your respects just to be safe. So it was a custom in pre-Islamic periods of time, unless your particular tribe or village happens to be at war with the other and having declared war on the other gods, it was customary that you still have to pay honor to whatever the god or goddess is of that particular territory. One proverb, Arab proverb, declares, when you enter a village, swear by its god, unquote. So we find inscriptions all over Arabia invoking and petitioning and thanking these deities. So we see them all over. Let's go to the next image. Often these words were accompanied by various gifts. In fact, let's go to the next one. One read from a Northwest Yemenite tribe as follows. So I'm reading an inscription here. It's dedication to his Lord, Du Samawi, in his temple, a bronze statuette of a she-camel, that Du Samawi may grant him well-being of himself and his children, as well as the well-being and safety of his camel. So here it is important, this dedication that to, obviously to the god, but also for himself, his children, and camels are really important. You'll find that out. By the way, Du Samari was a sky god of the Amir tribe in South Arabia, and the name meant being one with the sky. So, so there you have that nice image there. Let's go to the next image. So you do have gods all over the place, and we'll be talking about many of them coming up. So when I'm talking about polytheistic viewpoints, it's not that they all have the same pantheon. In fact, throughout Arabia, people had different pantheons with different league gods in charge of them. So there is not this uniformity. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go to actually let's just try to think here. Now let's go ahead and just talk a little bit. So the next thing, second, because those who live, oh, actually, I want to mention something else. They also live, these Arabs in Arabia and beyond. They live or operate within what is understood as a fear power paradigm. So they see themselves living in a physical world that coexists and is influenced by unseen powers. Now, obviously, this seems obvious because they're animists and they are also polytheists. But let's go a little bit further, because this internal vitality was woven within all the natural world and could indwell in people, indwell in animals and trees and mountains and objects. When approaching them, they believed the spirit within these objects or within these animals or within these trees and stones and places. It was believed that they created an atmosphere of power that can be physically sensed. That's a little different now, that you can feel it in your bones, that it sends shivers down your spine. It's that kind of essence, it's one of those things where, for example, recently, it was like 2 days ago, there is somebody who is coming from a Middle East background, from more of a traditional background in this area, and I had with me an artifact, an ancient artifact that was 3,000 years old, and immediately when he saw it, he started to go, "Ooh, I feel this energy from it." That's the same idea. I feel something. There's something there. So it was more than intuition. It was palpable. If the mood emitting from this spirit, either incarnated in the object or outside of it, if it was, it could be also felt, but if it was a good feeling, a pleasant feeling, that's great. But oftentimes, it also could emit a feeling of trepidation. And you realize at that point that whatever this is could be angry at you. And so this power automatically brought this sense of fear and trembling, right? A sense of awe, a sense of foreboding. Life in the desert. Many of the Arabs do live in the desert. Was not always a safe place. You had to be hyper vigilant of what's around the next rock. You had to be hyper vigilant what's around the next dune. You had to, because there were always kinds of dangers. There were brigands, and there were different, kinds of poisonous, snakes and so forth. So they had to be very vigilant. And the worst part of it is that many of these agencies, these natural agencies, were believed to be deliberately spirits. So there is this fear paradigm, right? The main way of dealing with a power like this was to establish rules to protect the unwary from harm, and procedures to appease these powers that could be offended. These rules in general referred to by sociologists and anthropologists as the idea of taboo. Taboos came in the forms like, special people that you can't associate with. That could be a certain priesthood, or that could be those who have an illness, or that could be many, or from another tribe that is not your own, that you're at war with, or, there are special people that are understood as taboo, or something about them, a characteristic about them makes them taboo, something that abnormality or something that is different can be understood as a taboo. Also, taboos include unclean foods. Certain foods are unclean. In this area, one major unclean food happens to be pork, right? So piggies are not very cost effective. They're very wasteful. They eat a lot. It takes a lot to keep them alive. And so having them in the desert is just not a good idea because you're going to be using so much of your resources to feed them. But also, there are some other reasons, the scavenger aspect, and yeah, you name it. And they get sick piggies, make you a sick person as well if you eat them within this context and so forth. So you got forbidden, unclean foods. Certain sacred objects are taboo. Even special names are taboo. So appeasement are usually made in the form of a sacrifice or some kind of dedication to these invisible powers. Also, these spirits took various forms. I mentioned these spirits took the form of ghosts or ancestors or spirits, as I said. There are mountains and so forth. But one thing I did not mention is that these spirits not only connected to objects, they connected to special shapes. So special shapes were believed to have indwelling power within it. What shapes? The crescent moon, for example, certain blocks, certain triangles, the way things are drawn, the way things are written. Wow. And so they have powers, and in some cases, touching them or is a taboo task. It's you are disturbing it. You're not showing it honor at all. Okay. Next, third, these supernatural powers, as I said, need to be appeased, and so these ideas were then created and passed down amongst the ancient Arabs and in the Near East. Sacrifices were typical. There has to be some kind of sacrifice to appease the deities. Let's go to the next image. So, of course, you're seeing right here. You're seeing one of these images that were cut into the stone that also included some deities. Also, tithes for both land and produce were to be paid to the gods. So tithing being 10%. These tithes were often then redistributed to whoever it may be. Let's take a look at the next one. I'm going to give you a quote. And this is frankincense, by the way. And I'll be quoting Pliny from the 1st century CE as he gives an illustration of such a practice of tithing in connection to frankincense within the Arab world. Of course, obviously, he's a Roman reporting outside of that, but it's still very interesting. So frankincense, he says, after being collected, is conveyed to Shawba on camels. One of the gates open for his admission. The kings have made it a capital offense for camels so laden to turn aside from the high road. At Shawba, tithes were estimated by measure and not by weight, and were taken by the priest for the god they call Seyon. And the incense is not allowed to be put on the market until this has been done. This tithe is drawn on to defray what is public expenditure for actually a fixed number of days. The god graciously entertains then guests at a banquet. So what is going on here is that you have frankincense, and so the kings basically say, hey, we're taking this frankincense and we're taking it aside and we're going to measure this as a tithe for the god. And it's going to be used by the temple and those who are the priests for a period of time. And then at a certain point, it will be then given or distributed out to the general public. Let's go to, okay, so these tithes could be used to pay for the upkeep of a local shrine or temple. These tithes could be used to support the clergy and even to be used for public works, such as maintaining the water supplies or constructing and maintaining the city walls. If a military campaign was about to commence and it was declared in the name of a god, so you gotta declare the name of God, this tithe revenue could be used to support such a military venture. But of course, the technicality is you have to make sure it's declared in the name of the god. This is as in the case of, let's go to the next image, in the case of Saba, where war was declared in the name of the kings of this region, and Almakak. Almakak, by the way, was sometimes, this is an image connected to this god, was sometimes the sun god and sometimes the moon god. And so it just depends. Within the ancient Yemeni kingdom of Saba, the rulers of Saba claimed they were the seed of Amakak. Typically, he was represented by a cluster of lightning bolts that surrounded a sickle-shaped weapon. His sacred animal was the bull. Let's go to the next image. In fact, what I find is interesting, this is pretty impressive. The moon temple of this god still stands in Yemen today. This was founded in the 5th century BCE. It's complete, as you see here, with 5 pillars, a ritual well, as well as an altar. Beyond tithes, the gods were offered wine and milk as libations. Of course, animal sacrifice was common too. Let's take a look at the next image. One curious custom was the offering of a she-camel to the gods. But this did not happen in the manner one would expect. This camel had to be the youngest female camel born to her mother. This she-camel also had to be still alive when her offspring bore offspring themselves. Now, she then became a symbol of fertility and longevity, believed to be invested with special power. Her ear was then ritually slit, making it taboo to touch her. After that, she was actually set free, permitted to roam about, to pasture as she wills, and to never have a herdsman watch over her. Who was in charge now? The gods were in charge over her now. They were ultimately her herdsmen. So I find this, again, very interesting. Let's go to the next picture. We know that also offerings were made in Syria connected to sexual intercourse with temple officials. This was common in certain places. Unfortunately, child sacrifice was also common. Now, also, special religious figures oversaw these sacrifices and other ritual actions. So what will happen here is that, and so what happens is we have, for example, you have priests that were considered. Some were understood as prophets or holy men or witch doctors. Their title, their role, it's the same. They were the ones who understood the needs of the gods or the jinn or the demons or whatever the spirits are. And they were the ones through whom the demons or the spirits or the jinn or the gods or the ancestors communicated. Now, in every fear-based culture, the pattern was much the same. The religious officials controlled people through the use of fear. They were very effective in their roles as a result. And so whole cultures and people groups were held in the iron grip of some of these holy men. There you have that. So let's go to the next image as a picture of a camel. Um, let's go to the next image. Fourth, the ancient Arabs lived in a fear-shame culture. They always lived in groups and so often did things in a similar manner. The extended family, especially the extended larger families, made up one's group. And so the gathering of one's relatives could even make up a tribe. Arabs defined their relationships with others in terms of near and far. Those who related to you by blood, well, they happen to be near, and those from other tribes are considered far. And so how do you get to connect with other people? Well, that's through marriage or adoption. But there still seems to be a high degree of conformity in the Arab world early on, inclusive of the pre-Islamic world. And so they had this honor shame system. So you can see here is kind of a chart here, and you see others believe, for example, within a guild culture, which seems to be connected to the West, that if you're guilty, I am found guilty and I am punished. If you believe you're guilty, if you believe that you're not guilty, is I should feel guilt. I should feel guilt. Not I should feel guilty nevertheless. But if I'm guilty, if I'm not guilty, if I believe I'm not guilty, I should say, I protect my innocence and fight the accusations. And not guilty, no problem. But here's the thing: the shame culture is a little different. So if you are guilty, I am found guilty and I am punished, right? But what if I am guilty and you're discovered to be not guilty by others? Well, no one knows, so I am not shamed. So this is what a shame culture is about. So it's all about public appeal. It's all about the larger picture of individuals who are looking at you, and through their observation, they understand where you stand. So you are always looking to make sure your reputation is good. Now, if you believe you are not guilty and you are decided to be guilty, you are shamed and dishonored by their belief. And obviously, no problem for the other. So it is, many ways, a society at this time about how you appear to everybody else. First, your family, your clan, your tribe, and so forth. There also seems to be a high value and prestige. We see this through the Murwawa Code early on, which is Muhammad talks about. He's actually, at a very young age, he's taken out to Arabia and he's raised with the Bedouin, and he has to learn the Murwawa Code. And he has lots of problems with this tribal code of conduct. And he realized that if one tribe attacks the honor of another tribe, the entire tribe will respond in order to protect the place of honor. And so what will happen is the concept of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is consistent within this notion. And he finds this as problematic, especially because what will occur is that, for example, somebody will kill your son. Well, that's what happens is the response is from another tribe. The response is, well, then you're going to have to kill the son of the person who, from the tribe and so forth. And it goes on and on, there's no end to it. It's a vicious circle. But value seems to come from this. So what do? You can take this down. So what do you do in order to punish those who are connected with this system? What happened in pre-Islamic period of time, and even after that, is the idea of isolation. The worst thing you can do is take in the Islamic times is to isolate the person from society, to isolate them from their family, to isolate them from their clan, to isolate them from their tribe. That is like death, because so much about survival is the socialization that occurs within the Arab family unit, as well as the clan and the tribes. So much is there. So that's the last thing you want to do, is isolation. Okay, so let's keep on going. Sometimes I want to bring up this also. I kind of forgot to mention this, and that is, well, we'll go on a little bit further, and then we will go back to it. I think that's what we'll do. Okay, so there are many. Fifth, of course, is that what we can discern from the epigraphic records is that a patron deity of people was also important within their belief systems. So the idea is that many of these tribes, if you hadn't noticed, I mentioned the fact that so much is about family. And so what will happen is the religious beliefs also connect to that notion. And so therefore, their gods have these like little mini families. And so you're going to have the father god with the mother god and with their offspring. Or you'll just have this whole lineage of gods, and they all seem to be interrelating with one another. But at the top, you have oftentimes a father god. Sometimes you have a mother god, but oftentimes a father god. And that's a dominant idea that you see throughout Arabia. And so once again, this is a reflection of understandings within Arab culture that the father is the one technically in charge of the family unit, or the oldest male is the one technically in charge of the family unit. So therefore, when it comes to the gods, there seems to be a patron or father god that is over everyone else, even over the other gods, and so oftentimes looks down upon everybody as, in a sense, their children. So I just want to bring that up as well. I want to talk about a little bit about a first fruit offerings, just a little bit. And then we'll go a little bit further from there. Okay. So first fruit offerings were expected by the deities, as well as firstborn offerings. All these were made with a heart full of gratitude, as well as expectations for continued plenitude. Life transitions were also occasions for offerings, whether birth or puberty or marriage, and yes, even death. These liminal spaces in between life phases were viewed as vulnerable occasions and needed extra protection, especially from evil spirits. But the gods themselves also did not look kindly if they were not acknowledged during these occasions. Hubris was feared, and failing to secure their watchful gaze could potentially open up pathways for retribution, or their allowance for perhaps a trickster spirit, such as the jinn, to create unexpected obstacles to force one to realize that their guidance is always needed. Sometimes a trickster spirit will be allowed by the gods to act as a stumbling block, an adversary, so that you realize that you need those gods, that you need to recognize them. Otherwise, you may go through various kinds of events through life and you just ignore them. The gods will not be ignored. So they'll open up ways for a trickster, an adversary spirit that in many ways you're thinking, aren't they working against each other? Well, yes and no, but the idea is we're going to create this space and allow for that spirit, the trickster spirit, to do this. it's fascinating. And we see this in the pre-Islamic period. By the way, this is also the context that we see within the book of Job with the Satan or the adversary. You see that same kind of situation where, hey, Job, he's going to, he worships God, he loves God. Yeah, but what if there's obstacles thrown in his way? He's going to, at that point, he's going to deny. And so the Satan or the adversary is allowed to play all these tricks and make all these hurdles and obstacles. And it turns out Job doesn't waver. And so he's proven as true. You actually have this trickster notion, even not only in Arabia, not only, of course, in the Levant, we actually have it further down, moving into Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. You always have these tricksters, even the Yoruba, right, has Isu, right, who is the trickster who does obstacles to make sure that you remember the higher orishas and so forth. So yeah, kind of a universal. Obviously, festivals were occasions for sacrifice, and so Diodorus mentions one of them. He says that in the above mentioned palm grove, a festival was celebrated every 4 years, to which the neighboring peoples thronged from all sides, both to sacrifice to the gods of the sacred precinct large numbers of well-fed camels, and also to carry back to their native lands some of the waters of that place, since the tradition prevailed that their drinks gave health to such as partook of it. So you have these times, but once again, you're going to get something back from these sacrifices. You're going to get this holy sacred water to bring back for people to drink. So, hey, it sounds like a kind of a good benefit to me. What do you think? Because rain was so important in Arabia, especially since droughts were so common, the sacrifices to the gods for rain was taken with an even more earnest effort to conduct the ritual in a precisely correct way. And so there are experts that are called Risha, who are required to be present for the task at hand. No rain was often interpreted that the gods were indeed unhappy with them, and was typically connected with the belief that some taboo had been violated. This belief was especially prevalent, for example, in the area of South Arabia. So once again, we're dealing with a fear power kind of system that we talked about before. There's a lot of fear here. Now, the rituals involved in sacrifice could be quite elaborate. For example, I'm going to describe one that I should have showed the picture earlier of the camel, but that's okay. But I'm going to describe a ritual described by Nilus. So once again, this is an ancient informant about a camel sacrifice. Now, I'm going to read this, and it's going to be hard for some of you to get through parts of it. Once again, this is an ancient sacrifice of a camel, but we want to look at how they did it in a close way. So I'm reading the primary source. Okay. So they make a white unblemished camel. This is referring to the Arab peoples. They make a white unblemished camel kneel on the ground and all together walk around it 3 times in a broad circle. One of their leaders, or a holy priest of suitable age and rank, leads both the procession and the hymn composed to honor the morning star. So this is a ritual offering to the morning star, which is the planet Venus. Inherently important in many ways to the Arab peoples. So much of the cosmology involves the movement of Venus, goes all the way back to the Mesopotamian civilization, but I'm being sidetracked, so I'll go back here where I'm supposed to go. So this is a dedication to the morning star Venus. So after the third revolution, while the people have not ceased to sing, so they're still singing, but are still carrying the last words of the hymn on their lips, the leader draws a sword and vigorously strikes it to the camel's neck. And he is the first to take eagerly a taste of the blood. Taste of the blood. So he goes out, he's cutting off the head of the camel, and then he's eagerly tasting of the blood. He's tasting the blood. Then, in the same manner, all the others run up with their knives, some cutting off small pieces of skin together with the hair, others grasping whichever part they come to and chopping off pieces of flesh. They continue right to the entrails and innards, leaving behind nothing of the sacrifice unprocessed to be seen by the rising sun. They do not even abstain from the bones and marrow, conquering with perseverance their toughness and gradually overcoming their obduracy. So you have what happens in this ritual is it's done before Venus, and they basically, after singing this lovely song and circling the camel 3 times, they all rush headlong onto the camel, and they proceed to, well, take it all apart completely before the rising sun. Now, the blood was typically poured out as a libation, often over an altar stone. Now, the blood forms a pact between humanity and the gods. The offering of the animal, a camel as cited above, made this life and its products sacred. As one consumed the flesh, one was also taking in the sacred energy, the blessing that was upon it via the deity of Venus, or I should say the god represented by Venus, which could be Auza, but we'll go into that later on. Note also that the blood was also tasted too. Hence, flesh and blood shared this bond that is created between humanity and the gods. So there does seem to be a little bit of Eucharistic feel to it, as you can imagine, and you can realize also this is not completely dissimilar to various practices done by the Habaru or the Hebrews, as we see in various Levitical writings. So it's something that you haven't, but this is still a little different. Still, you're consuming the whole creature. And yet, again, I want to bring up the fact that this camel is being sanctified by this prayer, is becoming holy meat. It is partaking of the divine nature, and by partaking of it, you are also taking hold or connecting to the divine nature. And we see this again, not only in Arabia, but we see this also in sub-Saharan Africa. One example would be the Maasai tribe that's in Kenya and Tanzania. So you have this intimate connection via the beast, via the animal. And I do find this quite fascinating. Okay, let's, where are we at right now? Okay, let's, next, so we talked about, often, there's another point. Another point is that the Arabs, they took their deities to war with them. So armies brought images or something connected to their gods to the battlefield to fight the other armies with their gods in turn. But we see this also quite a bit in the Hebrew Bible. So that's just the reality. The victorious oftentimes ridiculed the fallen deity. For example, Rabshakeh, the representative of the Assyrian king, in 2 Kings 18:17, made a big public statement to all the Jews as his army stood before the city walls. Have any of the gods of the nations delivered at all his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and of Orphad? Where are the gods of Sepharvim, Hena, and Iva? Who are they amongst all the gods of the countries who have delivered their country out of mine hand? And so, of course, he later brought a message to King Hezekiah, for example, of Judah, where he declared, have the gods of the nations delivered them, whom my father has destroyed, as Gozan and Haran and Riziph and the children of Eden, who were at Telassar. So we can also, so this is the Babylonian culture, but we're going to see also this is the same with the Arabs. You still have this conception, right? You still have this conception there that the gods make war on one another. And so when the army defeats with their gods another nation with their gods, those gods in turn are also defeated, right? Okay, so let's go to a few more images here. Okay, I just want to bring up, this is just an image that I had in mind when it came to isolation, such a beautiful area, right? Now, let's go to the next image. I want to bring up this right here too. I want to mention the fact that in the ancient kingdom of Saba, which is biblical Sheba in South Arabia, military campaigns were carried out for Amak and the Sabians, and fines for all manner of offenses were paid also to this god, as well as the kings of Saba. In other words, it was the cult of the patron deity that allowed the community to function as a coherent entity, as opposed to a mass of discrete localized kinship groups. And so the gods acted like this special glue that held everybody together. Let's go to the next image. In less complex societies, a number of the high gods, one known as Attar, the pantheon might be very small, and the patron deity assume a very prominent place. Thus, the inhabitants of the fertile oasis of Dedan, seen here in northern Arabia, turned to Du-Gapa, the master of the grove, for their needs, and rarely to any other. And so this is an image from that particular location. I would say that's quite beautiful. And so here we go. Beyond, next image, beyond the definitive patron deities, there was another structural level. There are numerous tutelary deities who afforded protection to villages, encampments, and families and individuals. But also, we have those known as the Jinai, or the jinn. Now, in the Quran, they are frequently mentioned alongside humankind, for they too were created beings, and so, though considered divine by mortals, were comparatively lowly. And we'll quote it here. It is God who splits the seed and the fruit stone. He brings forth the living from the dead and the dead from the living. He kindles the light of dawn. Yet they regard the jinn as God's partners, though he himself created them. And that's from Surah 695 to 100. So we see here the jinn are seen here or viewed here as God's partners, right? Also, accordingly, people, quote, worship the jinn, and it was the jinn that most of them believed, Surah 34:41. And what they most hoped to obtain thereby was security. Once again, Surah 72:6. Individuals of humankind used to invoke the protection of individuals of the jinn. So you have the jinn, and it looks like they are beings with a lot of power. Let's go to the next image. As far as how they are described, some say they are invisible spirits made of smokeless fire. The word jinn is derived from the Arabic word janana, which does mean to hide, emphasizing their often invisible nature. Yet they are also shapeshifters, able to become anything in the natural world. One of their favorite forms is that of a snake, in fact, cockroaches too. And this belief rises from the fact of how prevalent they are and revolting too. Yet they can become any animal, and they even appear as a human being. They often tease and they tempt and they trick and they try your patience. Next image. They can also be quite charming, in some cases too charming, and able to become both male and female. And sometimes they make advances, and in making those advances, they make out and eventually even have offsprings through humans. Still, next image, we do have quite a variety. I mean, look at the variety. So you have, for example, you have those known as the Query. This, of course, these they they try to tempt a person to commit sins, and they're the ones. These are the jinn that give you the nightmares deep in the night. You also have the Jathum. These are the ones that sit on your chest when you're sleeping, and they seem to be sucking your breath out. Eventually, if you're not careful, they'll suck it all out, and you will die. So hopefully, you will survive this. You have also the Duhath. This one rides an ostrich. Unfortunately, it does eat human flesh. You have the Sila. Maybe you heard that one before. The Sila. This is a woman who eats humans. And in fact, while its shape is kind of scary looking, very hairy like a monkey, when it becomes a beautiful woman, well, many cannot resist them, and and then they'll eat you. You also have the John. Now, not to be confused by this image, these are viewed as the predecessors of the jinn, and sometimes they appear as a whirlwind. Sometimes they appear as a white camel. And I have to say that they do live way out in the desert, but they are very open-minded about humans, can be very kindly, and offer up various benefits. You have the Gadar. Of course, these are pretty evil. They are literally giants, and they torture travelers by devouring their genitals and then leaving them in the middle of the remote desert. So you don't want to get close to these giants. You have the Ifrit. They are both good and bad, and they live underground, and they can marry humans. You have the Ghoul. They're ugly. They're savage. They live in graves, and they eat human flesh. Very much referred to in pre-Islamic poetry. This is one of the reasons why people are afraid to go out into the desert, for fear that a ghoul may come upon them. Let's go to the next image. Yeah, you got the Dawis. These are beautiful jinn women. They chase men at night, and they, they then, after pursuing them, they kill the man, and then they eat the man. We see these legends all over. We see these legends even in Mesoamerica, if you're familiar. You have the Shik. These also mate with humans. They're half creatures. They produce the Nasnas. You have the Hin in the form of dogs, and they happen before humans. You have the Kutra, which are werewolves, and you have the Shaitan, who give you evil thoughts and so forth. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these creatures. In fact, we'll just show one more briefly. And just the next image. Yeah. So you got the Drab, the Gujatis, the Bathmit, the Hatif, the dog heads. By the dog heads, people whose faces are the faces of dogs and their bodies are the bodies of humans. They hunt people and imprison them and then lead them until they become fat so they can eat them all up. So the dog heads are the ones that feed you all up. You have, of course, the Hatif are pretty interesting. A mysterious voice that can be heard without knowing its source in the middle of the desert. They're believed to be from the jinn, usually transmitting advice, directions, warnings, and announcing the death of someone. The Hatif, they have some similarities to banshees, but they are considered sometimes, I should say, considered good, although sometimes their mysterious voices can be very misleading. Watch out for that still voice in the middle of the desert, going with the desert wind. Oftentimes you'd hear them. As the wind blows, you hear these voices giving you advice. Or maybe you better take another sip of water. I don't know. So you have the Kujata. This is a great bull with 4,000 eyes. Now, apparently somebody went around and counted each one of them. I do not recommend them ever getting glasses. But they have 4,000 eyes, noses, ears, mouths, tongues, and legs between each of the two legs. And this is 500 years, and it stands on the Baphomet and carries on its back the angel who carries the earth. This is kind of a big one. And there's the Baphomet underneath it. And you have the Wak too, a tree that has fruit in pictures of women hanging from the tree by their hair, and it ripens and it falls to the ground. Yeah, interesting thing. So lots and lots of legends. Let's go to the next image. Lots of stories. Okay. Well, Robert Hoyland notes that a specific type of jinn was the companion jinn, known as the Qorin, who is born when its human partner is born. It dies when they die, but it remains with them at all times and exerts great influence for better or for worse when it comes to their behavior and condition and accomplishments. In particular, those who displayed an ability to manipulate the physical world or perform acts deemed beyond ordinary human capacity were thought to have been inspired or otherwise assisted by their Qirin. Jinn could also, however, be mischievous or even downright malevolent, and lore about their inopportune deeds and those of a variety of related ghouls and sprites has remained current in the Middle East until today. So while we're talking about the pre-Islamic era, you got to realize that many I've just mentioned go on very strongly or are even conceived and come about during the Islamic era. So you still have a very strong belief in the jinn by many Muslims today. Okay. And so there you have it, right? Okay. Let's go to the next image. Now, our sources also tell us about sacred places, sacred offices, and sacred times. In much of Arabia, sanctuaries would be open air, the natural features of the spot being sufficient to distinguish it. This might be a spring with its margin of rich vegetation, a patch of forest haunted by lions, a shady cleft on the mountainside, or a solitary eminence rising from the desert. The borders of the holy ground would usually be drawn somewhat widely, skirting the sacred center on all sides, and the whole roughly marked off by pillars or cairns. In cities and where money was available, the sacred place might be bounded by walls and filled with ornate structures, then constituted what we would call a temple. Now, what happens here is, let's go to the next image. The suspension within them of the usual state of human competition served two functions, as mentioned by Robert Hoyland. In the first place, it was a way of eliminating potential conflict over scarce resources, and so places of dense vegetation and abundant water might well be made into sanctuaries. Right? So what happens is that these places are ripe for competition, right? That people are going to be fighting over a water source. People are going to be fighting over a grove. And so by declaring this place as a sanctuary, as haram, what it does is it makes it accessible to everyone, but no violence allowed. And of course, that leads to the second place why it's important. It provided a venue for the accomplishments of activities by individuals and groups free from any interference. The sick and needy could petition the resident deity for relief. The guilty make confessions. The perplexed request advice and resolution of their problems. The harassed seek refuge and asylum. Pacts and agreement were concluded with the deity called upon to act as witnesses. And of course, rituals were practiced and numerous ceremonies were staged. So these places were free spaces for interaction, but no violence allowed. So let's go to the next image. So sacred sites were then therefore declared as haram for many reasons. One of the most obvious having to do with making certain that those who arrived here could experience the spiritual hospitality of the god without interruption from any outside source whatsoever. The word haram in Arabic is used to refer to any act that is forbidden by any of the Arab deities and later understood to be Allah. Now, I want to go to the next image. And you see here, of course, something, an example of a beautiful, beautiful lake here, and it's an oasis, and you see the palms around it. Those who were seeking refuge from their enemies could enter this space and receive asylum. Such a provision allowed for those accused of various improprieties time to explain without receiving the often swift enactments of equal justice. Misunderstandings did occur. All too often, they had the wrong person. And so many times, the God's hospitality was appreciated in such events. Petitioners could find relief here as well as privacy. Many of these sacred spaces were locations connected to important natural resources, making the declaration of haram able to force all to share these springs and groves equally, as I mentioned before. Hence, the god or goddess of these sites acted as divine witnesses to make sure these places are undisturbed, as well as making sure that the territory was understood as neutral territories. Sacred areas did not need to be staffed, but many were there as guardians or some performer of cultic functions happened to be there as well. The principal task of such officials was to maintain the sacred area and attend to visitors, receiving their offerings, aiding them in their rituals, collecting their fines and dues, and providing various divinatory services. And so you see that. Let's go to the next image. Oh, yeah. Yeah. This one's intentional. I'm bringing this up. This is a scene from Lawrence of Arabia. And of course, you see old, Lawrence there. And this is an Arab that showed hospitality to him at this well. Typically, wells, even wells within tribal territories, were still seen as protected by the resident spirit, the water spirit, or the spirit around it. So, but if you've seen this movie, you realize that this gentleman there, he will allow Lawrence to live because he's the outsider, but he does kill this man because he's not of the same tribe as he is, and so he should not have access to the well. This scene always bothered me from Lawrence of Arabia. Did this happen? It sure did when it came to certain groups, but I want to make very clear that such acts were not considered within the lines of common Arab practice. Again, we're back to the Marwawa Code, the code that Muhammad learned while he was out amongst the Bedouin. He learned that hospitality was always to be extended, at least for the first day, to those they don't know. And they could stay at most for 3 days. So that means that if you're a total stranger, even a potential enemy, and you come to visit, haram, you're not supposed to, the other person is supposed to give them some sense of hospitality. Give them food, give them drink. This also extends to sharing wells to a certain degree. But they still don't have to follow it, but it is considered inhospitable. And the reason why that's important is the Moral Code says that if you show hospitality initially, if everybody shows it, the desert will be a safer place to be. Does that make sense? Desert, if everybody's showing hospitality, at least initially, then it's a better place to be. So there we are. I just thought that was interesting. Let's go to the next image. Now, at major sanctuaries, and especially in city temples, there might be more specialized religious staff. The Sabaean goddess Dat Badan that we see here forbade invocation of her, quote, when there was not present in the sanctuary any priestess or seeress. By the way, the term for the latter literally means dreamer, suggesting a type of mediumship. And so this idea is that no, you can't do anything in the temple unless there is some official there, unlike that of these open air sanctuaries. By the way, this goddess, she was, as you're seeing here, was a goddess of nature. She was a goddess of the various oases, and she's a goddess of the wet season. Also, it's interesting is that she's typically worshipped at tree-circled pools like the one we saw earlier. So if you see trees circling a pool, hey, it could be one that's dedicated to Dat Ba'adan. So there it is. That's at a place known as Raidbun. There was a priestess apparently who also undertook various social work. So as in taking care of marital disputes. So there you have it, and also looking after hereditary questions as well. To a number of these holy places, pilgrimages would be made at certain fixed times a year. The Sabians were, for example, cemented by annual processions to the temple of Almec in Marib. Let's go to the next image, at times of the summer rains. So here's that temple. And so not only did the people of Saba attend, but also their allies were at least expected to send delegations, as the tribe of Samia were reminded in the edict to their patron god, Talab. So let's take a look at the next image. This is an image of Talab, who himself was an object of pilgrimage at his mountain abode in the land of Hamdan. By the way, this particular god, Talab, was a moon god and protector of pastures. The name means simply goat, and this particular bronze hand it dates from the 2nd to the 3rd century and as a representation of this particular god. So pilgrimages were important. So we see this. And with these pilgrimages, when you reach the site, typically it was haram to do any disputes once you get there, but we'll go into that in a little bit. Next image. Well, what's going on here is that the Arabs were also very much in pre-Islamic period into divination. In his great work on divination, Cicero notes that, quote, the Arab people heed above all the signs of birds, unquote. An illustration of this is given by the 1st century CE Jewish historian Josephus, who relates that the Nabataean king Herodotus, on learning that the emperor Tiberius had dispatched an army to punish him for a raid against the Jewish king Herod, quote, consulted the flight of birds, unquote. From this, he learned that, quote, he, Tiberius's army, could by no means enter Petra. One of the leaders would die, either the one who had given orders to make the war or the one who set forth to carry out the decision. And sure enough, actually it was Tiberius who died. And so the bird omen came as true. Another example is given in the Quran, which describes the reaction of the tribe of Thamud to the prophet Salih, who sent to warn them against their corrupt ways. They informed him that from consultation of the flight of birds, we augur evil from you, and they plotted against him. There was another divinatory practice widespread in Arabia, and that was decided upon a course of action by resorting to techniques based on chance or lot. There were three particularly popular methods in pre-Islamic Arabia. Of two of them, making marks in the sand and on rocks or throwing pebbles, we know very little, but can surmise that the decision would be based on whether an odd, bad, or even good number emerged or what pattern was formed as a result of that. We have much more information about the third technique, namely randomly selecting from a group of arrows marked with instructions. The practice, though probably very much in form and significance in different regions, seems to have existed throughout Arabia. We find it performed in Palmyra in the north, where we have mention of a basin of silver for casting lots on a honorific inscription from the Temple of Alat. It is also attested in Yemen in the south, where the expressions to draw arrows by lot crops up, as is the term a place of casting lots. Of course, casting lots, again, very important. We see even within Jewish tradition, within the temple. Now, the ability to divine was not granted to all, and so what happens is that certain people were required to be involved in this process. And so it's interesting that oftentimes we see women in these positions as those who are involved in divination. Let's go to the next image. So this right here, of course, is the Kaaba stone. I want to say a few things. What happens is we're going back, let's talk about pilgrimages. So all throughout Arabia and beyond, the Arabs made pilgrimages to holy sites, to sites dedicated to their patron god. Well, what happens is this town known as Mecca, which is really a city, has a site that was a major pilgrimage draw. And this, of course, is the Kaaba stone. And the Kaaba was a place of pilgrimage long before Islam came about, or I should say, long before Muhammad came about, being very careful here. So this is venerated. So what will happen is that people from all over Arabia would come to Mecca and go to the Kaaba stone. This Kaaba stone was dedicated ultimately to Allah. It was dedicated to Allah, who is understood as the Arabic word for God. So they all went there. Now, I want to say a few things. You see, what happens is this, much like we see in sub-Saharan Africa, much that we see in some cases of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, much that we see in Indo-European cultures and so forth, we see somewhat an idea of a God behind the gods. It's just one of those things. They see the universe, they see the plurality of the universe, but there seems to be something of an action that is consistent. There appears to be a coordinator for all the variables going around. And so they start to have this idea that while there are multiplicities of spirits, there's still something that's coordinating from beyond. And we see this even with the indigenous peoples of the Americas, the idea of great medicine, the great spirit, yada, yada, right? So, Talhuf, we see this. But moving on. So in Arabia, they started to have that same idea, that there's still ultimately something that holds it together, who is just simply God. And this God is connected to their local gods. So it's like a reflection of it. So their local patron deity is really an aspect of this all high God up there, Allah, which again simply means God in Arabic, nothing more, nothing less. So what will happen is if you translate a Bible into Arabic, you're going to use the word Allah, right? This is just simply the God. Got it? So Mecca becomes connected to this idea. And so people from all over Arabia in pre-Islamic times would make a pilgrimage to the Kaaba stone that's dedicated to Allah, but they see it as connecting to their patron deity. Are you guys following that? It's a representative of that, but it's also a great time to come together. What they will do is that at this time, during this time of pilgrimage, Mecca is a place of haram. So the whole place, in a sense, becomes sacred for that period of time once a year. And so this is a great opportunity from tribes, from all over Arabia to come together to Mecca to have a fair, a carnival, right? And so people can do their trades and have their conversations and make their deals without fear of one attacking the other, because at this point, there is this sense of peace. It's a place, right? It's a place where there is no fear, there's no threat. Well, you can see what will happen. So people will go there to the Kaaba stone all the time, and they will set up images of their own gods along the Kaaba stone because they see that Allah is simply a reflection of their own. And so what will happen is literally hundreds of these images will then surround the Kaaba stone, all reflections of their own. But you can see how Muhammad, his his granddad, his grandfather was the custodian for the Kaaba. And so Muhammad had a chance to see this, and you can think how what's going on in his mind. He's going, wait a second. There's a period of time when Arabs all over Arabia come together and under Allah, and they interact, and in a sense, they seem to be like one tribe, and it's an abode of peace. This is a great idea, right? So whether, could be divinely inspired, it could be just, but what the point is that Mecca is the perfect place for this concept. It becomes a center. So I want to say this again, pilgrimages to Mecca occurred long before Islam, long before Islam. There's so much in the way of materials to prove this. But you can see how Islam oftentimes will take the next step. So the Kaaba. Now the word Kaaba, let's go to the next image, is derived from the Arabic word mukab, which simply means cube. And that's what the Kaaba is. It's a large masonry granite structure, roughly the shape of a cube, measuring 15 meters high, with sides measuring 10.5 meters by 12 meters. This cube was cut from the hills near Mecca and is positioned upon a 10-inch marble base, projecting about a foot from the granite cube. The site was sacred to a deity designated as Allah, as I said, long before the arrival of Islam, according to both Muslims and scholars. In fact, Muhammad's own father's name, Abd Allah or Abdullah, means slave or worshiper of Allah. And Allah was more than simply a patron deity over Mecca. For many others, as I said, throughout Arabia worshipped him, especially the Manaeans, the Libnites, and the Sabians. We see this through various inscriptions. According to the Quran, many pagans viewed Allah as the creator of the heavens and the earth. Now, where does the Kaaba come from? Of course, many believe that it was originally a stone that fell from heaven, right? So, it's interesting that it's a cube shape, which you will see coming up, that many of the shrines, many of the deities, we even saw some earlier, are cube shaped. So you can see this but this is just simply an image, not to be worshipped, but it's a reminder of Allah. Now, what happened is that it was believed established during the time of Adam and Eve. Then there's a great flood, and it's reestablished by Abraham and Ishmael, right? And the line of Ishmael then goes all the way to Muhammad and his family again were caretakers of the Kaaba stone. So this is all pretty interesting. So Allah, this God, is worshipped, and we can count him as part of the plurality of deities being worshipped. But the site of the Kaaba was already sacred to others as well. And there were three goddesses that were mentioned in the Quran that were very important. In fact, it was Allah that was the most important worship there, but these three were worshipped almost as much. And this is, of course, a very interesting topic. Let's go to the next image, just so you see an old picture of the Kaaba stone without all the modern accoutrements. Lately, Saudi Arabia has been tearing down the entire downtown district and around the Kaaba area to modernize it. There's not really a deep sense of the importance of its history, so we've lost some of the very beautiful ornate buildings. Anyway, so let's go to the next image. Okay, so we have three goddesses that were also worshipped here. These, of course, accordingly, they were Alat, Manat, and Al-Uzza, who were closely connected to Allah and often viewed by pagans here as his daughters. Both the Quran and a scholar by the name of Hisham ibn al-Khalib, who died around 820 CE. So we're talking about a source from the early part of the 9th century, write about these three goddesses. So my source, I'll be using some other sources, but I'm using the source of the Quran itself and this very well-known Muslim scholar named Hisham ibn al-Khalib, right? So, and they write about these three goddesses. Hisham ibn al-Khalib tells much about these pre-Islamic beliefs in his work that's called the Kitab al-Asnam, or also means called the Book of Idols. Much of it preserved in the Geographical Dictionary of Yaqut, which came out during the 1200s. So I name my sources. I know that many of you want to know where I'm getting this information. I'm getting this part of the information. I'll mention where the other parts come later on. I'm getting this strictly from the Quran as well as this very well-known Muslim writer. According to the Quran, Alat, Manat, and Al-Uzza were called the daughters of Allah and were viewed by many to intercede before Allah. Surah 53, 19 to 23 says of the Quran says as follows: when the apostle of God was sent, God revealed unto him concerning them the following: have you seen Lot and Uzza and another, the third, Manat? What? For you the male sex, and for him the female? Behold, such would be indeed the division most unfair. These are nothing but names which you have devised, you and your fathers, for which Allah has sent down no authority whatsoever. They follow nothing but conjecture and what their own souls desire, even though there has already come to them guidance from their Lord. So unquote. Isn't that interesting? So these are the three. Let's look at Alat. Let's go to the next image. Alat, she was a moon goddess of North Arabia. She was originally introduced from Syria, but she was also connected to the moon goddess of South Arabia, known by various names, including Vad, Am, and Sin, which of course is a male, right? A male name. What I want to say about this is that sin, I just want to say, I'm going to go a little segue here. So a lot is known as sin in the South. It has nothing to do with sin as far as, there's no connection with the word that we have in English. That's connected to a Latin word, S-I-N-N-E, but we're not doing that word now. But I want to mention this, is that it's interesting that the moon god in South Arabia was known as Sin and does have affiliations with a lot. What I find is really interesting is that the moon god Sin also is worshipped by that same name in some places in the northern part of Arabia and around a certain mountain. Did you guys know that the feminine form of Sin, the moon god, is Sinai, as in Mount Sinai? So just throwing that one out for you to know. And that's the moon goddess. And that moon goddess, Sinai, is also correlated with the goddess by the name of Alat. But, and you're thinking, okay, so why do we have so many names? Why don't we just call them Alat? Well, you're gonna know a lot in a few moments. You see, we should cast some lots about it. But the point is a name Alat simply means goddess. That's all it means. It just simply means goddess. Oh, Allah, the god, Alat, goddess. I got it, Dr. Rietveld. Is this helping? Yeah, good. Let's go to the next image. Alat was considered the goddess of peace and prosperity, but conversely also of war and combat. She was often depicted holding a palm branch and accompanied either by a lion or a gazelle. Alat was sometimes the consort spouse of a god and sometimes the mother of a god. Alat was called upon for various reasons. Go to the next image. Both positive reasons, such as good weather, mercy and protection, and, well, unfortunately for vengeance as well. Let's go to the next image. So that's Alat. We learn much about the god and goddesses worshipped in Arabia from the Arab historian by the name of Ibn Khalib, right? Only a century after the advent of Islam. And he invested much of his time recording the oral traditions of the area, as well as consulting primary sources, inclusive of Palmyrene materials. Many of it has become lost to us. He notes that the Quraysh group want to circumambulate the Kaaba and say, by Alat and Al-Uzza and Manat, the third image besides, verily they are the most exalted females whose intercession is to be sought, unquote. And so the Quraysh tribe, of course, this is the clan. This is what Muhammad is a part of. They're said to go around the Kaaba stone and, yes, declaring the name of Allah, but also via these three goddesses. He says also, these were also called the daughters of Allah, who interceded before God, says Ibn al-Khalib. According to Ibn al-Khalib, the city of Taif was the center of Alat worship, stating as follows. He says, they then adopted Alat as their goddess. Alat stood in Al-Taif and was more recent than Manat. She was a cubic rock besides which a certain Jew used to prepare his barley porridge. Her custody was in the hands of the Banu Attab ibn Malik, who had built an edifice over to her. So you have, so she is represented here at Taif as a stone, a cubic rock. The Quraysh, he says, as well as all of the Arabs, were wont to venerate Alat. They also used to name their children after her, and of course goes through the various names. He also notes Alat continued to be venerated until those known as the Taqif embraced Islam. Here, when the apostle of God dispatched Al-Mukhrib Shubab, who destroyed her and burnt her temple to the ground. In this connection, when Alat was destroyed and burnt to the ground, There was a warning that came as a result, and warning not to worship her nor avenge her destruction, and goes on. There is also, anyway, move on. So that's the first. Let's move on to Manat. As for Manat, next image. Mana originated from the Hijaz, with her name arriving from the root word mana, meaning to determine or to met out. Hence, Manat is believed to be the goddess of fortune and fate. According to Khalib, the most ancient of all these images of Mana was Mana. The Arabs used to name their kids after Manat. Manat was erected on the seashore in the vicinity of Al-Qudas. All the Arabs, he says, used to venerate her and sacrifice to her. But he says also they still preserved a little of the religion of Ishmael, which we're not sure what that means. He goes on to say that Arabs among the people of this area and other places who took to their way of life were wont to go on pilgrimage and observe the vigil at all the appointed places, but not to shave their heads when they're on their way on pilgrimage to Mecca. At the end of the pilgrimage, he says, however, when they were about to return home, they would set out to the place where Mana stood, shave their heads, and stay there for a while. They did not consider their pilgrimage completed until they visited Mana. So what will happen is, which I think is interesting, is that today at the Kaaba stone, you have many of the males will go through the process of shaving their head, but this would be connected to the Kaaba and to the whole pilgrimage. In the case of these people, however, this was done in connection to Manat. So, and once again, she was destroyed when by order of Muhammad. Let's go to the next image. Next image, of course, is Al-Uzza. She came from the region of Sinai and was the goddess of the planet Venus. Often Alat, who represented the moon, was connected with Al-Uzza, who represented Venus, and sometimes depicted as the crescent and the star put together. According to Ibn Khalib, Al-Uzza was said to have stood, and so most likely was a stone pillar. Also, he talks about the fact that people used to receive communications, various oracles via this goddess. They used to journey. I'm reading from the source. They used to journey to her, offer gifts unto her, and seek her favors through sacrifice. There, of course, is one interesting image. Let's go to the next image. There's another image of her. And so I'm going to go ahead and read you a little story here. And it's a very interesting one, and I want to take the time to go through it. So here we go. Ibn al-Khalib says that Al-Uzza was represented by 3 trees. It says Al-Uzza was a she-devil which used to frequent 3 trees in the valley of Nekla. Now, I want to read the story, and you'll find it interesting. When the Prophet captured Mecca, he dispatched Walid, saying, "Go to the valley of Nekla. There you will find 3 trees. Cut down the first one." Khalid went down and cut it down. On his return to report, the Prophet asked him, saying, "Have you seen anything there?" Khalid replied and said, "No." The Prophet ordered him to return and cut down the second tree. He went and cut it down. On his return to report, the Prophet asked him a second time, "Have you seen anything there?" Khalid answered, "No." Thereupon the Prophet ordered him to go back and cut down the third tree. When Khalid arrived on the scene, he found an Abyssinian woman with disheveled hair and her hands placed on her shoulders, gnashing and grating her teeth. Behind her stood Dubya as-Salimi, who was the then custodian of Al-Uzza. When Dubya saw Khalid approaching, he said, "O thou Al-Uzza, remove your veil and tuck up thy sleeves, sum up thy strength, and deal Khalid an unmistakable blow. For unless you kill him this very day, you shall be doomed to shame." Thereupon Khalid replied, "O Al-Uzza, may thou be blasphemed, not exalted. Verily I see that God has abased thee." Turning to the woman, he dealt her a blow which severed her head in twain, and lo, she crumbled into ashes. He then cut down the tree and killed Dubya, the custodian, after which he returned to the prophet and reported to him his exploit. Thereupon the prophet said, "That was Al-Uzza, but she is no more. The Arabs shall have none after her. Verily, she shall never be worshipped again." Unquote. Now, what is interesting about this is that it is a representation of this goddess as in existence, that she really does exist. But what is also interesting is that she is not depicted as a demon acting as a goddess, but she is depicted as the goddess, a goddess herself, which is fascinating on a whole bunch of different levels. And I wish I had time to unpack it all, but it does reveal the fact that many of those in Arabia and in pre-Islamic times, but even into Islamic times, believe that these gods do exist and not necessarily being just simply evil spirits or demons. Let's go to the next image. So there is this diversity. There is this perspective. This is another image of the goddess here. And I think it's very important to understand when we look at even the biblical sources, where you have, the idea, in Exodus, you have no other gods beside me, and the idea is there's still recognition that these other gods exist and are not necessarily equated with demons as of yet, but it's the old tribal idea that one god knocks out the other. This is an example, an early Islamic example from the early 9th century, being recorded of something that happened during the time of Muhammad's lifetime, where this belief seems to be deeply set at this time. And again, there's so much to unpack. I wish I had time. Let's go to the next image. Ibn al-Khalib also records other gods at the Kaaba, including a certain one known as Hubal, who was a god of divination, with arrows tossed before his statue. The direction in which the arrows pointed answered the questions asked of the image. So you have that. The Quraysh had also several idols, he says, in and around Kaaba. The greatest of these was Kubal. It was, as I was told, of red agate in the form of a man with the right hand broken off. It came into possession of the Quraysh in this condition, and they therefore made it for it a hand of gold, and it stood inside the Kaaba. In front of it were 7 divination arrows. On one of these arrows was written pure, and on another alien. Whenever the lineage of a newborn was doubted, they would offer a sacrifice to it, to Hubal, and then shuffle the arrows and throw them. If the arrows showed the word pure, the child would be declared legitimate and the tribe would accept him. If, however, the arrows showed the words alien, the child would be declared illegitimate and the tribe would reject him. The 3rd arrow was for divination concerning the dead, while the 4th was for divination concerning marriage. The purpose of the 3 remaining arrows has not been explained. When they disagreed concerning something or proposed to embark upon a journey or undertake some project, they would proceed to it, that being Hubal, and shuffle the divination arrows before it. Whatever result they obtained, they would follow and do accordingly. It was before Hubal that Ibn al-Matlib shuffled the divination arrows, in order to find out which of his 10 children he should sacrifice in fulfillment of a vow he had sworn. So here we have an instance of human sacrifice that happened at the Kaaba before the Islamic era. He goes on, and the arrows pointed to his son Abdullah, the father of the prophet. Hubal was also the same image which Abu Safwan ibn Arab addressed when he emerged victorious after the battle of Uhud. And it says, Hubal, be thou exalted. To which the prophet replied, Allah is more exalted, more majestic, unquote. So this is really interesting, right? So you just heard about the divination techniques done at the Kaaba to Hubal, and you're getting this information from Islamic sources, which of course are the kind of sources that would protest these kind of things, which when recording makes it all the more a testimonial. Now, according to Al-Azraqi, the image of Hubal was brought to Mecca from the land of Hit in Mesopotamia, which is in northern Iraq. As for the name Hubal, is a combination of the word Hu, meaning spirit or God, and the Moab god Baal, meaning master. So it is, in a sense, put together, it means the spirit master or the master of spirits. And you can see the master of spirits within the natural world. And of course, divination type, goes right in there. Hubal's name appears in one Nabataean inscription, and sometimes is connected with Manat as well as Dushura. Also, there is a description of an image made of cornelian pearl and relates that it had a vault for the sacrifice. And so you have all these other images too. So, there's quite a bit. What I find is also interesting is a Byzantine pilgrim went there and described that there was even an image of Mother Mary that was at the Kaaba. What will happen, of course, is that Muhammad will come to Mecca and then in the 630, and he will clear out all these images and rededicate the Kaaba stone simply to Allah. But I want to make it very clear that Allah was already worshipped there as his overseeing deity. So there you go. Let's go to the next image. We move on to the Nabataeans. The Nabataean Kingdom was located about what is now modern-day Jordan and the Sinai Peninsula, and the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia. Was already in existence by the second quarter of the 2nd century BCE and continued until the area was annexed by the Romans, by the Emperor Trajan in the year 105. And so it lasted for 280 years. This is an Arab kingdom. The rise of the Nabataean Kingdom was directly related to the decline of power of both the Ptolemaic as well as the Seleucid kingdoms, especially by the close of the 2nd century BCE, and it filled a regional power vacuum. The capital of the Nabataean Kingdom, of course, was Petra. Let's go to the next image. Petra, of course, was a commercial center for much of the Arab world. It was perfectly located. As you can see here, you have the revenue coming from the Red Sea, and it moved right up along the Sinai Peninsula directly to Petra. You had also the land routes going through Mecca and other parts of Arabia that would also go directly through Petra. You had the trade coming from Africa, from Egypt, crossing the Sinai Peninsula, going to Petra. And of course, you had, there was a wave stop that continued on to Judea, you see there to the north, and then on to the Middle East, as well as across Anatolia and into Europe. So it was very much the center, and no wonder it's such a beautiful place to this day. Let's go to the next image. So what will happen here is that the Nabateans were loyal to a god by the name of Dushara, who is understood as the master of Shara. The mountain range encompasses much of the capital of Petra, and so he is the god of this mountainous area. He is the king of the Nabateans. In fact, in Arabic, Dushara means Lord of the mountain. And so it looks like that this deity connected to Petra, and then in turn, which is the capital city of the Nabateans, and then of course extending out, it looks like that he was a mountain deity. I do find it interesting that this idea of a mountain deity even connects to Judaism, because what will happen is you have this idea of El, which means God, and Shaddai, and the word Shaddai could be a derivative of the word mountain, and so it would be God of the mountain. So El Shaddai is dedicated to this God of the mountain, most likely, of course, that would refer to Mount Sinai, possibly, which is another holy mountain. So you do have in Arabia and in the Levant these important deities, male deities connected to mountains. And so now it does also look that they adopted Dashura from the Edomite god Dusharis. According to the Nabateans, Dashura's mother happened to be Manat. Hey, we came across her already. Yes, the goddess of fate and fortune. Dushara was considered the chief god of the Nabatean pantheon. He was oftentimes, according to the Greeks, equated with Zeus, and according to the Romans, with Jupiter. The historian Strabo mentioned the Nabateans worshiped the sun and set up altars to it in their homes, and added that they made daily libations on these altars and used incense. The sun was most likely directly associated with Dusura in some way, so maybe with the mountain and the sun. An archaeologist by the name of Philip Hallman comments that, quote, the god of the people of Dusharis, lord of the Sharia mountains, the exact nature of this deity, whether it was a mountain or a solar object like the sun, is still not entirely clear, he says, in terms of the original concept held about him. As a contrast, the Sabians of the southern Arabia worshiped the sun cradled in the crescent of the moon. Yet Dashara was also associated, of all things, with Dionysus. That's right. And so according to the primary source known as the Suda Lexicon, this is compiled at the end of the 10th century, but referring to older sources which have since been lost, Dashura was even associated with Ares. It says Theos Ares Dusharas. This is the god Ares in Arabic Petra. They worship the god Ares and venerate him above all. His statue is an unworked square block stone. It is 4 foot high and 2 feet wide. It rests on a golden base. They make sacrifices to him, and before him they anoint the blood of the sacrifice that is their anointment, unquote. A shrine dedicated to Dashura has been discovered as far away as the harbor of ancient Puteoli in Italy. In 106 CE, after the reorganization of the Nabataean Kingdom in conjunction with several adjacent cities of Decapolis, becoming the Roman province of Arabia, the cult of Dusharis continued to prosper. Next image. The coins of the province's major cities in the imperial age bear eloquent witness to the strength of this great Nabataean deity. More than that, they reveal not only the prevalent representations of Dusharas in an aniconic guise, but a human face for him as well. These coins are the only explicit, unambiguous guide to archaeologists have today to the exact look of it. I'll go to the next image. I'm sorry. This is the coin. There it is. There it is. So you can see here, it just is simply an image. It's not human in this sense. So we have that. So there we go. Next image. This is also, believe it or not, another image of Dushuras that we see in this niche here. And of course, again, this is without an explicit image that we can readily apply. Next image. This right here, believe it or not, is connected to the goddess by the name of Auza, which we came across already, who is the mighty goddess, who is often coupled with Dashura. Auza was associated with Aphrodite, Venus, and of course, other gods as well, including Isis. Representations of Auza are carved in the treasury of Petra as well. Let's go on. Here's another image here. I want to go into, so while some archaeologists feel that the female goddesses in Petra are all Auza, others think that these are Isis, the Egyptian supreme goddess. The problem is that Isis, her name does not appear in any of the Nabataean god lists. So now her attributes and aspects appear present in Nabataean temples, but we see this in association with Auza. However, on the other hand, Osiris, we do find mentioned by name here, but we don't find it when it comes to Isis. So yes, Isis connects to Auza, which of course connects to Venus, which is actually the morning star, but it's not an exact one-to-one correlation. Let's look at the next one. There is something else that's interesting. I think this is hard to see, but I think the next one will show the image just a little better, at least close up. Yeah, it's all right. At El Tanur, located in Wadi Hassa, the northern border of the Inner Kingdom, archaeologists found that connected to Auza is this supreme female goddess who is associated with vegetation and grain, who's connected to the Nabataeans, obviously. So fertility was important. And so it does look like, indeed, that Auza, who is connected to the planet Venus and has attributes connected to Isis, is also being understood as this supreme goddess figure connected to a cornucopia of different fertility associations. So there you have it. I do find that as interesting. Let's go on to the next image. At the Temple of the Winged Lions of Petra, there was a considerable number of cultic materials that have been recovered, which demonstrate the importance of Auza, including a real seal, a ring seal, showing a new goddess, a crowned female goddess riding a dolphin, drilled cowrie shells of a variety sacred to Venus, and idol blocks that we see here. Next image. I wasn't able to get images of all these, but I did find the winged lion that's connected to this site. Okay, good. Let's go to the next image. These are a few other images that are connecting Auza with Isis that seem to have some correlation. Let's go to the next image. So is it Isis? Is it not Isis? Is it Auza? Is it a combination? Anybody can guess. Let's go to the next image. Okay, so this one, you can see here, the Arabian god family tree. Obviously, this is not always correct, but you see how some of them may be understood as connected. But the one I want to look at right now is Al-Qam in the bottom right, who is a warrior god who protects caravans. Let's see me for a little bit. So what happens is Al-Qam, this god, drank no wine, which was typical of the non-agricultural desert. Large numbers of inscriptions reveal that he was one of the key gods invoked by the Nabateans to protect them at night. And we find as a night god, he protected the souls of the sleepers in the form of stars, accompanying them in their nightly journey through the heavenly realms, as well as guiding caravans in the desert by means of the stars. So Al-Qam is connected to the guidance of the stars, leading us across the ocean deserts, so to speak. So that's interesting. Let's go to the next image. We have also Al-Qutbay, who is the god of learning and commerce and writing, as well as divination. And so this is yet another important god, right? And then, of course, we have, let's go here. I'm skipping this section here. Let's go to the next image. We also have what is known as the Nabataean zodiac. So I want to go here for a little bit here. So this is pretty intriguing. And what happens is that at a place known as Khirbet Tanner, we have found the Nabataean zodiac. This has been dated to the first quarter of the 2nd century CE. Obviously, zodiacs were familiar throughout the Roman Empire. And we find this also in Jewish synagogues. I've seen a zodiac symbol at a place known as Tiberias along the Sea of Galilee. It is in a synagogue, right? But this zodiac circle is interesting. One of the symbols of the Nabataean zodiac portrays Alat, the female goddess of fertility. She is armed with a lance or a sword, which can be seen faintly above her left shoulder. She may also have worn a diadem. An ancient festival was celebrated by the Nabataeans and their nomadic neighbors when the birthing of lambs marked the spring season. It was a time when grazing was good and the earth was green from spring rains. And so the Nabataean Sagittarius is rendered as the bust of a jovial youth. Let's go. It's the next image. Maybe you can see a little clearly. Maybe not. Nope. Let's go back to the other one. Wait. You can kind of see it. Yeah, go back to the other one. This youth probably bears a resemblance to Nabataean depictions of Al-Qutbay, the god of learning and commerce. A spear or greatly enlarged arrow juts above the top of his left arm. Capricorn, is shown in the Nabataean panel as a damaged bust of a human figure, rather than the traditional Roman fish goat that was common throughout the Roman Empire. The remaining symbols of the Nabataean zodiac conform to their Roman counterparts, but they are enlivened with original touches of artistic creativity. The Roman version, by the way, follows a traditional order known as today. I want to do a comparison just for fun. The Roman version goes as follows. It begins at the top, typically going counterclockwise, and it runs as follows. You got Aries, you got Taurus, you got Gemini, you got Cancer, you got Leo, and you got Virgo. Then there is a break at the bottom, after which the succession resumes with Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and finally Pisces. The Nabataean zodiac is different. The zodiac found at Khirbet Tanner begins counterclockwise with Aries, and then Taurus, and then Gemini, then Cancer, then Leo, and then Virgo. And then there's a break by Nike's head, and then it follows like the Roman version. So you have a difference in the direction. Libra is to be next in a counterclockwise progression, but this is not so. This space is occupied by Pisces. Instead, the Nabataean Libra appears at the top besides Aries. This begins a clockwise progression around the zodiac circle, opposite left side, beginning clockwise from Libra at the top. The progression follows an order from 7 to 12 to the end, and so forth. So I guess Libra is interpreted in a different way by the Nabataeans in a different, looks like, part of the year. So I don't know how to figure that one, but there you go. Okay, so moving right along. Oh, I got a better image. Go to the next one, and then go to the next one. I do have a better image. There we go. So here we are. So we have the zodiac, and you can see there are different, absolute different ideas here in connection. But there you have it. Okay, let's go to the next image. The Nabataeans often, next image, represented their deities in the form of stelae, often taking the form of rocks set up on one end, or blocks or shapes carved into a stone wall, or these digen blocks set at the entrance of their cities. So this is an example of a digen block at Petra. So this is dedicated to a deity. Concerning these stones, Maximus of Tyre in the 2nd century comments in his work as follows. He says, the Arabs serve I know not whom, but I saw this statue, which was a square stone, unquote. And of course, as one enters the site of Petra, several examples of digen rocks are still in situ that you can see here. Scattered around, let's go next image. Scattered around the burial cities are hundreds of high places. Some are proper high places with evidence of altars and other items. Others are different. In most of these cases, steps lead up to the side of mountains or rocks to a small flat ledge or surface area. Let's go to the next image. Although these may be, okay, this is one of these images that were, next image. So I know it's a little blurred here, but this high place is known as Robinson's High Place. The high place is located at the very top of a mountain, and typically high places are. The main steps to the high place starts just before the amphitheater. Over 800 of these steps lead you up to your destination. As you reach the top of the mountain, you will come to what is known as the Atuf Ridge. On this ridge are 2 obelisks, such they are carved out of the solid rock and are over 6 meters high. They have been noted as Nabataean, of course. Next image, the high place has a large pool where rainwater was collected and available for priests. In front of the altar was a large open court with a strange ridge in the middle where something must have stood at some point. The altar on the far side may have been used for blood. Animals were sacrificed, apparently, at this particular altar. Were there ever human sacrifices at Petra? There's no hard evidence, but there is a Nabataean inscription at a place called Mida in Salih, which reads, Ad Wad, priest of Eid, and his son Salim and Zaid Wad have consecrated the young man Salim to be immolated to do Gabat. So that seems to be maybe human sacrifice. The god Al-Uzza is also known to have received the sacrifice of boys and girls. In particular, the pagan philosopher Porphyrius states that once a year a boy's throat was sacrificially cut at the oasis of Dumat, some 200 miles from Petra. So there is evidence for human sacrifice in some cases. Let's go to the next image. Well, with the rise of the Nabataean Kingdom, you have some pretty prominent kings. Aratus IV was one of them, but it was what will happen. Of course, Aratus IV, he's actually considered one of the greatest of the Nabataean kings. During his reign, large religious centers were built all throughout his kingdom, at Haran and Petra, at Edvit. Aratus' daughters married. Aratus' daughter, singular, married the Herod Antipas, who is a tetrarch of Galilee. When Antipas took another wife, Herodias, Aretas' daughter, returned to her father, who went to war against the Jewish tetrarch and defeated him. Antipas appealed to Emperor Tiberius, who dispatched the governor of Syria to attack Aretas. This episode was an important factor in the beheading of John the Baptist. The apostle Paul mentions Aretas IV in connection with his visit to Damascus in 2 Corinthians 11:32. But take a look at this. Often called the treasury in Arabic, al-Kizna, there is this magnificent rock-carved edifice which was built during the reign of Aretas IV in the early part of the 1st century CE. And you're looking at it right here. The Arabic name treasury, let's go to the next image, derives from one legend that bandits or pirates hid their loot in a stone urn high on the 2nd level. Significant damage from bullets can be seen on the urn. Apparently, people took this legend literally. Local lore attributes this, of course, to Bedouins who are said to have shot at the urn in hopes of breaking it open and spilling out this treasure. But the decorative urn is, in fact, of solid sandstone. Another legend is that it functioned as a treasury of the Egyptian pharaoh at the time of Moses. Even though this story is not true, it's good that people believed it because of that belief, because Moses is also connected to, in the Quran, it helped preserve the site from being destroyed in any way. Just going to mention that. Let's go to the next image. The layout of the treasury is quite simple. There are 3 main chambers, one very large one and 2 smaller ones right and left of the porch. The main central chamber had a rear back chamber plus 2 side niches. The chamber to the right of the porch also has a large back niche. Before the treasury is positioned what is called let's go to the next image. I want to show you this real quick. I also want to show that on the facade, you see what is understood as, and I brought this up earlier, as an image dedicated to Isis, but it's Al-Uzza, right? But you can see, according to this image, it is ISIS. You got some dancing Amazons here. You got the image of victory. So wonderful. Next image. This is such a beautiful, beautiful piece of architecture, and we saw this in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. It was, of course, filmed on site. So if you ever have a chance to go, please go. Let's go to the next image. The entrance before the treasury is positioned what is called the Sik, which means in Arabic, literally the shaft. This is the main entrance to the city of Petra. The dim, narrow gorge, in some cases, is no more than 3 meters wide, winds its way approximately 1.2 kilometers and ends at this treasury. So this is the great reveal at the very end. A wide valley outside leads to the Sik, is known as the Bab al-Sik, gateway to the Sik. Let's go to the next image. The Sik was not formed from erosion, but is still a natural geological fault split apart by tectonic forces. Water only later then smoothed its surface. The entrance of the Sik contains the remnants of a monumental arch. There's a few pieces of it left, but there are also some underground chambers, and we're not sure what they were used for. Let's go to the next image. Another monumental landmark built during this time at Petra is called the monastery, in Arabic, El Dir. It's also a monumental building carved out of the rock. This building measures 50 meters wide and is a beautiful Nabataean classical style. So let's go to the next image. And you do have some other beautiful places here as well. But of course, eventually the Nabataean trade dwindled as the Romans diverted the perfume and spice cargoes to Egypt. and so eventually it faded away. Let's go to the next image. We're going to conclude today about Palmyra, and that's I want to make sure that we hit this spot. According to the Bible, King Solomon gave importance to the oasis of Palmyra, and he established a caravanserai there, built Tadmor in the wilderness, 2 Chronicles 8:3-4. But not all archaeologists agree that Palmyra as being Tadmor in the Bible. We knew that Palmyra was merely a village when Pompey the Great came to the eastern regions of Syria and annexed it to the Romans in 64 BCE. But eventually, Palmyra started to grow and become, in fact, a major center. In fact, when Mark Antony came through Syria in 41 BCE in an attempt to consolidate Roman power in the region, since his earlier conquests were not considered very effective, he found Palmyra inhabited by the Kedri or the Kedar, and these individuals were sometimes mentioned by Ezekiel. When Mark Antony approached Palmyra, the people living there fled with all their possessions, to the left bank of the Euphrates. The village was considered too small to even pillage or burn, so Antony carried on his way. So really, the city just popped out all at once. Eventually, though, with the presence of Rome in Syria and the establishment of trade routes with Persia and India, and these trade routes went as far as China, Palmyra found itself in the middle of a very lucrative trade route. The fact that Palmyra was located at an important oasis in a very dry region also made the city an important stopping place. Palmyra then became the pivotal city for merchants. Appian states as follows. He says, being merchants, they bring products of India and Arabia from Persia and dispose of them in Roman territory. These merchants brought frankincense and myrrh from South Arabia and northern Somalia and Oman. They also brought ivory and turtlecell from India. They brought spices and pepper and ginger and cumin and cloves and cinnamon and celery seed and saffron, all these spices. I mean, they grew rich. And so the city grew in magnificence. So let's take a look at the city. Next image. So as for the territory, Palmyra controlled an area known as the Torah that extended 75 kilometers to the northwest to Khirbet el Bilas and 65 kilometers to the southwest to Qasr el Hir, which formed the boundary with the territory of Emissa, and it also ran all the way to the Euphrates. Next image. In the first century, Pliny the Elder describes Palmyra as a, quote, a noble in situation, in richness of its soil and pleasantness of its waters, whose fields are surrounded by a vast encircling of sand, unquote. Palmyra was the center of olive production. So the elites of Palmyra became quite wealthy, both through land ownership and farming, as well as their taxes. Let's go to the next image. All dedications of buildings made of Palmyra were presented in the name of the tribe. And so tribal affiliations of Palmyra was a part of the political social structure of the city, revealing their nomadic backgrounds. So I would say that during the time of Tiberius Caesar, Palmyra was moving from a town into a city, pretty much. Let's go to the next image. And so we arrive at some of the sites and also related to their religion. So during around 19 CE, the very year Germanicus was sent to Syria with the 10th Legion, the Temple of Bel in Palmyra was begun and was dedicated by 32 CE. This is the Temple of Bel. The name Bel means Lord or Master. And so it is a title rather than a genuine name. In fact, many Mesopotamian gods of Akkad and Assyria and Babylonia applied the title Bel for their all-high god. For example, the Babylonian high god Marduk was known as Bel Marduk. In this general sense, Jeremiah 51:44 states, I will punish Bel in Babylon and make him spew out what he has swallowed. The nations will no longer stream to him, and the wall of Babylon will fall. The feminine form of Bel is Belet, meaning lady or mistress. The word is an East Semitic form of the Northwest Semitic word Baal. So Bel and Baal or Baal are related to one another. The Temple of Bel combines Greco-Roman architecture with Semitic and Near Eastern fixtures. It's located within a precinct surrounded by porticos. The temple itself is oriented north-south, and it is rectangular in shape. The cella is entirely surrounded by a pro-style Corinthian columns. Let's go to the next image. It's very beautiful, right? Let's go to the next image. Take a look at this. So yeah, it was monumental. Next image. The cella is unique in the fact that it has two inner sanctuaries, the north and south, dedicated as the shrines of Bel and other local deities. The northern niche housed the statues of the three principal Palmyrean gods, Bel, Aglabol, and Malakbel. And of course, Aglabol is the moon, and Malakbel is the sun. And so it housed these particular deities. This niche was possibly separate from the rest of the cella by a curtain or a wooden screen. And let's go next image. There's a little close-up of the two different shrines. The ceiling of the niche is a single stone with an elaborate decoration, portraying at its center a series of deities. Bel is surrounded by 6 other deities. Their corresponding Greek counterparts are in Roman names: Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Venus, and the Moon. The 7 deities were placed inside a vault, so they were also a representation of the known planets. So there is a connection here with the planets, well, at least the 5 known planets, plus the moon and the sun. The bas-relief carving of the 7 planets was surrounded by 12 signs of the zodiac. Also here were carvings of a procession of camels and that of a veiled woman. And so you have, of course, pairs of windows cut high in the air. It was a pretty amazing place until, next image, until it was destroyed. Yeah. In 2015, you have ISIS or ISIL coming in. And because of this pre-Islamic heritage, and because their form of fundamentalism does not allow for that memory to perpetuate, they saw that this would be a good target to destroy. All that's left is the entryway, and this beautiful monument is now gone. They have been trying to raise money to rebuild it, to put the stones back together, but it's been slow moving, and there's just not enough revenue. And of course, Syria has been going through lots of political situations that are not ideal when it comes for Western support for archaeological preservation at Palmyra. And this is indeed a tragedy and a testimony to what fundamentalism can do to our shared world culture. And so this is quite upsetting indeed, right? Yeah. So, okay. So let's go to the next image. Unlike the Greek and Roman pantheon, the Palmyrene gods were not known to fight amongst one another. A 1st century CE relief found near Palmyra and currently in the Louvre portrays Bel between Aglibol, which is the moon, and Malak Bel, which is the sun, all in Roman military attire. From many of the inscriptions found by archaeologists, it is clear that Bel was directly connected to Zeus, while Alat was viewed as Athena. Many of these inscriptions are bilingual in Aramaic as well as Greek, and in some cases, even trilingual, Aramaic, Greek, and Latin. Let's go to the next image. The name for the moon deity, Aglibol, simply means in Arabic, calf of the Lord. But because his name includes the word bull instead of Bel, right? The former being the local Palmyrene word for Lord or Master, it appears that this god was worshipped here earlier than Bel, with the word Bel imported from the east. Bull was the original high god of Palmyra, with their most important god then being connected to the moon at first. It's interesting how we see these moon deities, male moon deities in supreme position, and then they start to waffle, and then you see in many cases moving into a sun deity. We see this a little bit in Arabia, but anyway, moving right along. And so, of course, this influence may come arise from the Neo-Babylonians. Aglibol is depicted with a lunar halo decorating his head and sometimes his shoulders. And one of his attributes happens to be the sickle moon. Aglibol is linked with the sun god Yarabol or Malakbol in the famous Trinity, as we talked about. He is also associated with the Syrian versions of Astarte, Venus. Let's go to the next image. So Maklabel is always positioned on the left side of Bel, and he was the god of the sun. The name Maklabel itself means messenger of Bel, or, and this is interesting, it can be understood as not just messenger of Bel, but of course the word messenger is a Semitic word, and it's close derivation of the same Semitic word in Hebrew for angel. And of course, the word Bel means Lord. So Maklabel can be translated as messenger of Bel. It can also be translated as the angel of the Lord. Wow. From the perspective of those who are listening to it. Maklabel, for that time. Maklabel is often depicted as a young and beardless deity wearing native Palmyrene dress and is often devoid of a nimbus. One altar depicts the 4 annual stages of life of Malakbol, symbolizing the year sequences of the sun. Because the root Bel is in his name, of course, this means it's East Semitic. According to inscriptions, both Aglibol and Melkobel had their own special place of worship in Palmyra, known in Greek as the sacred wood, and in Aramaic as the garden of the gods. Let's go to the next image. The inscriptions referring to this sacred precinct begin around the second half of the 1st century BCE, but at this point, the location has not been discovered. We know that the cypress tree was sacred to both deities and was most likely within this grove, but again, we have not found it as of yet. A relief discovered at the Temple of Bel, located in the peristyle south of the entrance porch of the cella, depicts Aglibol and Malakbel shaking hands over an altar covered with fruit. And I think that that's the next image. Well, it's not the altar, but they are shaking hands here. And of course, but anyway, in this other one, above them flies an eagle with palm branch in the claws and so forth. So let's go to the next image. There was also a temple dedicated to Baal Shamin. It was built shortly following the Emperor Hadrian's visit to the city in 129 CE. as evident from an inscription where a donor for the erection of the temple indicates he paid for the stay of the emperor's uh, uh, followers in Palmyra. Now, next image. Baal Shamin was a deity of Phoenician origin who was known by the epithet Lord of Heaven. The weather itself, whether is rain or not, depended on his mood. And so because of this fact, his cult spread towards the Haran region in southern Syria. And so it is, in a sense, a Phoenician export. It was here's another image of interest that's connected to the same god, Baal Shamin. Go to the next image. So there you have it. Next image, please. Unfortunately, the temple of Baal Shamin was also destroyed by ISIL or ISIS, and has not been restored. So much is gone. Let's go to the next image. There's also the temple dedicated to Nebo, which is built like the temple of Baal Shamin, and it also was a great sanctuary. Nebo issued oracles similar to those of Greek sanctuaries dedicated to Apollo, like at Delphi and Delos. We also know that there was various celebrations dedicated to Nebo. So there you have it. Next image. You also have a temple dedicated to Alat. As I mentioned before, Alat was connected to Athena, and so this is pretty well preserved. This had not been destroyed by ISIL, but hey, it's still, at least parts of it stands. Next image. Of course, you have the theater, and that's still around, located near the Agora, and it's quite impressive. And then, of course, you have, next image, the famous monumental arch that was built during the reign of Septimius Severus. It was a beautiful arch at a 30-degree angle, and it ended it was at the end of a very long colonnaded street. Unfortunately, this arch was also destroyed by ISIL. And so again, it's another sad story. So much of Palmyra, again, was destroyed by the fundamentalist group known as ISIL. And we have lost a lot when it comes to this heritage. Okay, I'm going to quickly wrap up. I just want to say a few other words, but I want to say, go to the next image. I just want to mention that, I guess sorry, this is what it looks like now. You can see the outline of where the arch used to be, and you can see the rubble that is left behind. Wow. Okay. So this is a testimony that that there has to be a need for historical preservation, and so hopefully, maybe at some point, these monuments will be rebuilt, although some people say just keep it in ruins as a reminder of what prejudice can do. But I don't know. I think we see the blocks there. Maybe we could reconstruct it. Go to the next image. There was also a rising up from Palmyra, a certain Odeonathus, and he was a great leader in Palmyra. I don't have a lot of time to talk about him, but what will happen is that he was very instrumental to the Romans. For example, he fought against the invading Goths, for example, and so, but also he's connected to a famous leader by the name of Zenobia. Let's go to the next image. She was officially known by the Romans as Julia Aurelia Zenobia. She called herself by the Aramaic Bat Zebai. But while she like to self-stylize her line is connected to the Seleucid line of Cleopatra and the Ptolemies. She was actually of Arab descent through her father's line, and had access to the earliest. She had access to the earliest sources here. Zenobia, what happens is that after her father was killed, she became the head of the tribe, and she had basically all the talents of Cleopatra. Some say that she was even more beautiful. But what happened is that she led a revolt against Rome. Let's go to the next image. She led a revolt against Rome, and so the Palmyrans actually formed an empire that took over much of the Eastern Roman Empire and held sway for a very long period of time. Let's go to the next image. This occurred right there. So all this area was conquered by the Palmyrene Empire. Her main goal is that she wanted Egypt, and she focused on that, and she did, in the end, gain Egypt. And so there was a period of time when the Arabs had an empire that ruled over territories that were connected to much of the Roman Empire. But that would be for another talk at length. I do have quite a few pages on that, but that is the perfect place to conclude this particular story. So let's see my face again. We have covered a lot. We have covered a lot of territory. At the same time, I believe that we have learned much about the roots, the pre-Islamic roots of the Arab peoples, but we've also learned a lot about legacies that still within the Middle East today, in these lands by the Arabs, you still have many similarities to the pre-Islamic period. You take a look, you still have today, for example, an honor shame system that's there. You still have this idea of community that is all important. There's cohesive aspects that hold everything together. You still have this idea that nonconformity is not always a good thing, and that isolation is something to be avoided at all costs. You still have a very rich culture that has romanticized in many ways the desert, even though a large portion of Arabs today are city dwellers, right? But you still have this romanticized version that comes from pre-Islamic period of time, which is interesting because Muhammad does cultivate this ethos. Not only do we see this in the Quran, but we also see this in the Hadith, in the sayings of Muhammad. You have this idea that there's a purity to the desert. There's a simplicity to the desert. There is this feeling that you are transparent before God, right? And so this idea is get out from the distractions, get out from the clutter of the material world, and get out to the place where you have the rolling dunes and you have the ships of the sea, the camels crossing over these, by moonlight in some cases. It's a beautiful picture. But this ideal is early on cultivated by the Arabs. And, we see this not only by outsiders, but also we see this by the insiders, by those, by Arabs themselves under Islam, I should say, who are Muslims who have various writings concerning these issues. Okay. It also, you have, I mentioned the Marawa Code. The Marawa Code, much of this, the Marawa Code ethos is that we see here amongst the Arabs is something that Muhammad, as a child, took to heart, and it it pervades also much of the lifestyle that is encouraged by the Quran. And so this idea that hospitality rules should apply, that's important. You should give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Is somebody coming in from the wild woolly desert, wild woolly desert, they're coming in, you should just assume that maybe that person's a friend. Give them something to drink, give them something to eat, give them some place to stay, because the roles could be reversed someday. The roles could be reversed when you're out in the middle of the desert and you're looking for some kind of refuge, and you want that same kind of consideration to be returned to you. That earlier idea was part of this pre-Islamic culture. But you also have this notion of haram, this idea that there are places that need to be protected, places that are protected in the case of pre-Islamic civilization, places that are protected by the various gods or spirits or jinn. And the reason why these oases or groves are protected is because they need to have a place to meet and be safe. Not worried about any kind of injury, so they can drink from the waters in peace without fear of being beheaded. So they can relax. Out there beyond is the conflict, but here at the well, here at the oasis, here at the grove, where here we might find figs and pomegranates and of course something to refresh our spirits, to bring us back. This idea of a haram, a place of protection, will go very much into Islam, especially in reference to the Kaaba. So as opposed to having all these different places all over connected to specific deities, even though you have this notion that those areas should still follow hospitality laws, the moral code still applies, as I brought up earlier, the idea that the Kaaba now becomes this place of haram. So as opposed to being spread all over the place, the Kaaba is a place of haram, and not just once a month, when of course, once a month, once a year during a special month for pilgrimages, but now continuously throughout the entire year. So you're taking a look at this and you're thinking, what do you mean? What are you talking about? For example, as I mentioned before, you have multiple tribes. All these tribes that all seem to have a patron deity, many of them masculine, so patron deity, although you do have exceptions where there are females ones. But the reality is much of Arabia is still a patriarchy. So you have all these patron gods over various tribes, and they're at war with each other. And yet they each have places, sacred places connected to them, where they are venerated, that has the ideal of haram. They are protected. So why not combine them all together, as they're already starting to be viewed at in Mecca at the Kaaba under the designation Allah? Why not combine them all together and make the Kaaba stone that place for haram, and have everybody under the same patron deity? And so as opposed to fighting tribes, now you have one tribe under one patron deity and one sacred spot, and that is the Kaaba. Does that make sense? You see how this all comes together? Well, this is pre-Islamic civilization, ideas and beliefs now being brought forth and put directly into Islam, right down to, we saw a lot of these various square stones, did we not? A lot of square stones, Beetles, connected to these patron deities and gods in general. Well, doesn't it look like the Kaaba stone? That's right. So you're replacing all of these stones with the idea of the Kaaba. Even though the Kaaba, the cube, is not worship per se, it still becomes a focal point for people to go. And of course, if you're a Muslim watching this, obviously you pray this direction, or you pray towards Mecca, you pray towards the stone. You're not praying to the stone, you're praying toward the stone in the idea that there is the Allah above. Also, did you notice something about pre-Islamic civilization? And that is, did they depict their gods in anthropomorphic form? Yes, they did. But a lot of times they didn't. A lot of times it was simply a stone or a square, or it's abstract. What? So it's this idea that the gods are beyond, especially the patron god is beyond the idea of making the image. It's beyond imagination. It's not of this material world. And so the representation oftentimes will simply be a pillar, a stone. And so you already see this tendency in pre-Islamic civilization. You see this tendency to go, hey, you know, we're not going to make an image of the sky god. So while, for example, you do have images of El at sometimes, other times, like in the Levant, you don't have images of El. You just have a representation of it. You have what? You have a standing stone, right? That's right, a standing stone represents the god El. And you're talking about El now. What about Allah? Same word. What? Same word. It's El in the Levant, which is connected to, of course, those who are Canaanites. It's also connected to the Israelites, right? I mean, hello, El Shaddai, God of the mountain, right? Elohim, right? And it's also, of course, in all these names, right? Michael El, right? Rachel El, right? It's also connected to Israel, right? So El, and you just cross this word El, Elal, Allah. It's the same. It all means God. So I'm talking about El. So it's the idea that there's still this, because remember the Canaanites, they have all these gods, but they say, oh, but there's the Ancient of Days. There's an old patron deity at the very top, and that God is El. It's the same thing that happens in Arabia. They go, well, this God is called Allah, but we think that this Allah, this God, is our God. It's our God. We gave it a local name. We gave it a local name, and but we still have the general principle of God beyond that. Does that make sense? So we named it, and of course we have all these names of various gods that we talked about that are worshipped by the Nabataeans, the Palmyrenes, and quite a Dashura and so forth. But still, those are specific names for this idea of a general God out there. And so what will happen is, as I said, as if people went to Mecca, for example, they would just see this Allah as being a representation of their God. Got it? See how that? So all these ideas come together. It's pretty amazing. And so with this said, this is why, and I'm explaining myself for a very specific reason. This is why early Muslim writers were at pains to preserve this information. They wanted to make sure that you knew the context. I know you would think that they would reject such notions, but they didn't. They went ahead and they wanted to explain these earlier connections to their own beliefs, because the idea is, from their perspective, Allah was always there. It's just that he was manifesting himself, not in different ways, but manifesting himself. And eventually people got the right idea, but there's like a true way that goes through it. But still, and there's corruption and so forth. But the idea is that there's still the context that's important. And so, so we do have all of these writings describing how this comes about, even if the system is looked at as false or as not as something that's against their beliefs. They will still take the time to describe them, which, by the way, is we don't like to do today, especially those who are within a more of a fundamentalist context. They don't want to take the time to understand other beliefs. They just don't. And of course, you also have the sad testimony of ISIS or ISIL. I will bring this up too. I'll say it's because also of this heritage, this pre-Islamic heritage. Many Muslims within these kinds of groups, most Muslims I know are horrified, by the way, of what happened to Palmyra and horrified by ISIL. So they are in many ways these groups are considered heretical, Al Qaeda as well. But I want to make a reference. I want to say that still, um, um, amongst those kinds of groups, these monuments are always threatened, and that's very upsetting. We also had the situation with the Taliban, what they did with the giant Buddhist statue in Afghanistan. So these are sites that are here, and hopefully they will be here for a long time, but we just don't know. Because the threat of fundamentalism in this guise, that's complete intolerance and the need to destroy is very prevalent even today within many circles, and it's very upsetting. But moving right along, we have seen now a lot about pre-Islamic civilization. We also realized that even though it is a patriarchy, you still have, for a very long time, the idea of goddesses being important. And even we saw this with Alat, Manat, and Aluza, that even during the first earlier period of Islam, you still had this need to address these female deities, because these ideas don't disappear easily. Wow. So we have learned a lot. I'm going to close it up. But thank you so much. I did all this with a little headache, so hopefully I managed through and said the words I needed to say. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.